Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Headline Books Zoom into Books Christmas Extravaganza session. This evening, we have several special guests joining us. We have an entire crew joining us this evening. Our program tonight is the Musicians Christmas Extravaganza with members of the cast and crew of The Mountain Miner. And here is Gloria Raheja, who is going to be moderating for us this evening. Thank you all so much for joining us. Also, I'll add really quick, if you have questions for our crew this evening, go ahead and type them into the comments section of this video, and we'll get to as many of them as possible. So without further ado, go ahead and take it away, Gloria. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm really honored to be here and to have been asked to do this. I've taught the film a number of times at the University of Minnesota, and I love it so much, and I see new things in it every time I watch it. I've probably seen it about 15 times now. So I'll just get started. I got some questions here for almost every, I think I should say who's here, right? Dale Farmer is the wrote the screenplay and was the director of the film. Trevor McKenzie, I think he's coming. I'm not sure if he's here yet, but he was instrumental in getting the music together for the film, the beautiful, wonderful music that you can hear on the soundtrack. Warren and Judy Waldron are here. Elizabeth Laprelle, ballad singer and now actress, is here with us. Amy Cogan Clay, who acted in the film. I'm going to miss somebody, probably Ma Crow, wonderful musician, who played the adult Ruth, the adult version of the wife of Charlie Abner. Dan Gellert is here, an incredibly wonderful fiddler, and played the adult Charlie in the film. Did I get everybody who's here? Susan Pepper, who appears in the film and worked on the music as well. So I guess I should just get started. Did I get everybody? Have I missed anybody?
Scott Young is also with us. Scott produced the soundtrack.
Ah, okay. Hi, Scott. It's a beautiful soundtrack, and there's more music in there than is even in the film, and it's so wonderful. So Adele, I'm going to start with a question for you. Just for the people that maybe haven't seen it yet, or even if they have seen the film, could you tell us a little bit about the story that you tell in there, and also what inspired you to do it, because it's the story of your own family. It's so fascinating.
Yeah, the Mountain Miner, it's an Appalachian migration story. There was the big Appalachian migration that took place in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and even up through the 50s till now, where resources ran dry in Appalachia, and folks just, many tens of thousands of families moved from the Appalachian Mountains to Ohio and Michigan and Illinois and other states to find work. And those families faced a lot of discrimination, as any other migrant would. A lot of people looked down on them unjustifiably, and they had a lot of challenges, but they brought a lot of resources with them and contributed greatly to society. And one of the resources they brought was their music. And the Mountain Miner is a story of one of those families, based on my family, that has to leave the mountains of Jackson County, Kentucky in 1932 and move to Ohio. And at the same time, it tells the story of Charlie Abner in 1985 as he's retiring and contemplating moving back to the mountains. So it was just inspired by my grandparents and all the stories I heard growing up and the music I heard from them. And it was just a story I felt needed to be told. It hadn't been told in a positive way. It seems like every movie or book you read portrays Appalachians in a negative stereotype. It makes Hollywood a lot of money to do that. So we decided to do something different and tell the story that we know is a true story of how the Appalachian people are.
That's one of the things that I really, really appreciate about this film. And in fact, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, I might as well just ask it now. let me see where I have them written down so I won't forget. Well, in any case, several times in the film, the characters in the film talk about those negative stereotypes that they will face or in some, have faced, and they know about them. So could you just elaborate on that a little bit about that question of the negative representations of Appalachia?
Well, there's one story in the book, in the film, that little Ruthie tells to Charlie about Ohio. And this comes right from the lips of my grandmother telling me this story, that the kids made fun of her, how she dressed at school. Appalachians made their own dresses and their own clothes a lot of times, and sometimes they were made out of feed sacks. And so the kids were making fun of her, and so she decided to put a stop to it, and she had an altercation with them, and that's just one of many stories. You can just think about how migrants have it. I mean, it's a universal story. They're made to feel that they're not good enough, and unfortunately, after they hear that enough, sometimes they start to believe it. And in the factories, from what I've read, the Appalachians come from a culture of working sun up till sundown to stay alive. And for them, sitting in a factory punching widgets for 12 hours a day was the easy street, And so the factory loved the Appalachians because of their work ethic and how they would work and wouldn't complain about long hours. Well, the people up here, they didn't like that, the other workers, and it caused conflict. And it's just general conflict that they've had to live with and still do to this day. If you have a mountain accent, you're just thought of as not being as intelligent as someone with a Midwestern accent. And that's just so unfair and untrue. And thankfully now society has changed to the point where Appalachians are really starting to embrace their heritage, and they're starting to be proud of that accent. And I think it's great. And I hope that this film is part of that turning tide and can inspire people to embrace where they come from.
Well, I think it's done that I'm up here in Minnesota teaching Midwestern kids who don't know anything about Appalachia. They always want to say Appalachia. I have to fix that, but they appreciate the film for that too. So I'm so grateful for this film for so many reasons. I know a quite well-known ballad singer from Western North Carolina whose parents moved out from Appalachia, and they stopped making the music. They stopped singing the old ballads because they were made to feel so ashamed. And fortunately now people my age and younger have, taken that up again. But there was that hiatus when the stereotypes were so bad that they didn't even want to do it. One thing that is Trevor here now? Because I have a question for Dale and Trevor. Is Trevor here? One of the things that I find so wonderful and intriguing about this film is that the story that you told us about, right? It takes place, we see the actors portraying, telling that story. But I think the story is also told through the music, so that you could listen to that soundtrack and the narrative of the film would run through your mind as you listen. So that's, to me, is such a powerful thing. And I wondered if you, Dale and Trevor, could talk about that. I mean, how the music was so brilliantly selected to tell that story, in relation to what we see happening, the events on the.
Yeah, well, I don't see Trevor, but for me, the mountain minor refers to a musical key, actually, and for me, it's something that had an impact on me as a child. I would hear those tunes in the mountain minor, and it would give me this kind of spooky feeling. And it just made me feel like I was actually down there, even though I had not been there before. And this was even before I knew that my family was from Kentucky. It was when I was younger, and there was just something that connected me to that place and that sound. And when it came time for the movie, I knew I wanted that sound throughout it. And I went over to Dan Gellert's house one evening and I said, Dan, this is what I want this film to sound like. Can you just start playing me tunes that had that feeling? And he just, you know, for a couple hours, he just played one tune after another. And that's a cherished recording I have now too. But between Dan and I think we found the tunes, the fiddle tunes that we wanted. And then there was also the ballads. My grandmother was a ballad singer, and that ballads have that mountain minor feel also. A lot of them do. And so Susan and I together thought about who we would like to play the parts. And, you know, Elizabeth Laprelle was the first person to come to mind. She just captures that so well. And so there's a little bit of subtext in some of the songs. She sings a ballad called Young Emily, which is also Edmund and the Lowlands Low, which talks of someone going to another place. And Gloria, in your liner notes, you address that so well. If anyone gets the soundtrack, Gloria wrote the liner notes as well as Jerry Milnes, and it's just really will explain this music to you. And so we just, you know, chose songs that we thought had that feeling to them, that had kind of a lonesome character that connected to generations. Then I worked with Scott Young a lot in putting the soundtrack together. I'm not sure I would have done it chronologically. You know, there's, you know, when you do a CD, you want to do pacing and such, and Scott pretty much wanted to do it chronologically. And I'm really glad he stuck to his guns on that, because it does, you were right, it does tell the story. You can just listen to it. So.
Yeah, well, I had a question for Dan that, what, you know, you talked about Dan's role in this, but I did have a separate question for him. So if he's here, is he?
Yeah.
He's, hi, Dan.
Yeah, here I am, yes.
So this, the Abner fiddle that's passed down. So the story involves not just the Abner family migration and their music, but a fiddle that is, how many generations, Dale? About 7 generations it's passed down now? Or?
It was 6, I guess you could say.
6. So, I mean, I love that image of this fiddle, you know, coming down the generations. And it's central, the fiddle and the passing down is central to the film. And it's sort of, to me, betokens not only, you know, obviously not just the importance of the music, but also the generational continuity that is so powerful in this film. So Dan here, we're so lucky to have him here. He's one of the foremost old-time fiddlers in the world and an expert, amazingly, in Eastern Kentucky fiddle styles. It was so wonderful to see him in this film. So Dan, could you tell us a little bit more how you contributed to the selection of the tunes and how you approached maybe playing them in the film?
Well, I wouldn't call myself an expert. I'd say I used to be a fanatic. Now I'm a hobbyist in my old age. I'm not as fanatical as I used to be. The tunes are the couple of tunes that are most prominent in there, that Gloria in the Meeting House and Hickory Jack, are both from the recordings that were made for the Library of Congress by Alan Lomax back in the late 30s sometime, of this fellow named Luther Strong from Magoffin County, who was just an incredible fiddler. And I encountered that at the Lincoln Center Library in New York, in the middle of Manhattan, I was living in New Jersey as a kid, and I went into the city because I found out that I could go there and borrow this album, but and it was a Library of Congress LP album on clear 12-inch clear vinyl, clear red vinyl. It was. I still remember that. And there was this sound, just like Dale said, it grabs hold of you. There's, you know, it's the thing that this fellow that I knew was an Irish fiddler, a fellow from West Clare, who he referred to it as the yeah, you know, and I've actually I'd always thought of that as sort of a onomatopoeic kind of a thing about in the sound, you know, that, but it actually is a legit word in Gaelic, but that's the thing. It's that certain sound that just sort of grabs hold of you. And a lot of it does have to do with the key. But anyway, the thing is, I was just trying to channel as much as I could of that sound of Luther Strong's fiddling. And when I listened to it, I really hear how far off the mark I am. But it certainly inspired me from very early on.
Now, were some of those tunes were ones that your grandfather and so forth sang?
Oh no, I've you know, I mean, my family connection with this thing is mostly that I grew up listening to Folkways records. I was, you know, my parents had, you know, all kinds of music around, but they certainly they had records of Pete Seeger and Woody Guthrie and Leadbelly and Sonny Terry and all those people who recorded on Folkways back in the early 50s, and so that sound was there and part of it. But then my mother's side of the family was quite serious musicians. My grandfather, my mother's father and her brother were both composers and musicians, and my grandfather had come from Hungary and had studied. There certainly was a deep respect for the even though they were trained classical legit musicians, they were, you know, the real, they had real respect for the old time music of the old country too, the gypsy stuff and the peasant stuff both. My grandfather studied with Kodai, who was, you know, and I think at least had a passing meeting or two with Bartok. So, you know, those guys were some of they were doing field recordings long before Lomax was of the old time music back there.
I have a question maybe for Trevor if he's here, but also Dale and Elizabeth. The first time I heard about this film was when somebody told me Elizabeth Laprelle is going to be in a film. And I was really excited about that. I'm writing a book about Appalachian music. And at the moment, for the last couple of years, I've been focusing on the balladry. I mean, I talk about blues in Appalachia, I talk about everything, but I've been focusing on ballads. So I've been immersed in that world. So I was so excited because Elizabeth Laprelle, she's such a wonderful singer. I mean, brilliant singer of this. So I think I saw a trailer first with Elizabeth singing Young Emily. And that's the first full length. We hear some other music before, but that's the first full length piece that we hear is Elizabeth as Oza Apner singing Young Emily. And that, you know, that ballad dates back to at least the 1700s. It's a British ballad, probably before that. And its preservation in the mountains, I guess you could say, is a reminder of that, the earlier migration from England and Scotland and Ireland to Appalachia in the late 1700s and early 1800s. And so its placement in the film signals that, like, these are people whose ancestors have migrated once before. But also, it's a story about, the film is about generational continuity, but the story in that ballad is about terrible generational discontinuity. A father has his daughter's lover killed because he doesn't want him around, you know. It's such an old song, and it still seems to resonate with the characters, with Oza, played by Elizabeth Laprelle, with young Charlie. We hear it twice. We hear it at the beginning of the film, and then a little later when the family, Charlie, there he is, young Charlie plays that as they're about to leave. And it's, you know, it made me think, oh, he's thinking about that ballad in terms of another kind of discontinuity. So I'm just so struck by how that ballad, you know, appears twice in the film. And I just wondered if Elizabeth or Dale or Trevor also, because he helped with the boozing, could just talk about that, the choice of having that ballad appear twice.
I'm doing a lot of talking, so I'd love to hear from Elizabeth.
Okay. I can't remember how we chose that, although I know there was a space in the script for a ballad. That's what I remember. And maybe I sung a couple for you, and you kind of left the choice up to me. But what it reminds me of now is that when I first when I made my first album of music, I was pretty young. I was 16, but my younger cousin was about 10. And when I put that song on that album, which I learned from the amazing ballad singer Sheila K. Adams, and his mom told me that he would listen to that song over and over, that he really enjoyed the album. That was like one of his favorites. And so that makes me think of, a young kid about 10 years old listening to this like gruesome story, but finding something compelling in that, and even some family connection, right? Because we didn't live close together, but I think he would hear the song and think about like, oh, this is my cousin that's far away. So that's what that reminds me of now. And I think that the tie between the song and the person that you learned it from is really, really strong. Other singers, from this tradition have written or spoken about that. So for Sheila K. Adams, her songs always come with amazing stories of all of her relatives that she learned these songs from. And the same thing with some of my other heroes, like Texas Gladden. She always said that when she sang the song, the person that she learned it from, like she would see their face, they would pop up. She would never forget who she learned the song from. So the continuity is really strong in the memory.
Well, thanks for that. I mean, it's kind of amazing to me that it wasn't planned in advance. There must be young Emily, because intuitively, I think, you chose a ballad that works so well in telling the story of the film. So, and I do love I have that album with it on, and it's lovely there too. So, Dale, do you have anything else to say about that?
No, I think one of the first times I heard that actually was on Elizabeth's album. I saw Elizabeth when she was probably 15 at the Appalachian Festival in Cincinnati, and was just blown away by this little girl with this amazing voice. And I had to buy her CD, and I listened to her sing it many times. I wasn't sure if she'd want to record it again, but because she already had it recorded, but I thought it fit the movie so well. And we considered a couple other ballads too for that reason, but I think we ended up landing on it because of some of the subtext of the story. So
Can I interject something?
yes.
I hadn't thought about it, but as we're talking, I was thinking that it's interesting that sort of the musicians who've been in the film, their repertoire kind of helped create the palette for the movie. So it wasn't like, hey, can you learn this song for the movie? It was like, what's dear to your heart, that's going to work.
Oh, that's great. We should point out to people who are yet, familiar with the film that the actors are not like drawn from, a list of professional actors. They're brilliant musicians, and turned out to be great actors too. So it's really amazing. So that, they didn't have to like learn how to play the banjo or the fiddle to be in the film. These were already people that were so accomplished as singers and musicians. So.
Yeah, and thinking, like Dan was saying, like he had been listening to that song and thinking about that song since he was 19.
Oh.
Or was it younger? What?
12 or 13.
12 or 13. And then all these years later, we're hearing.
Yeah, maybe not quite that. Yeah, no, it must have been more like 15. Yeah, because I remember going into, I would have been 15 or 16 when I encountered that. Yeah.
Well, Susan, now that you're here, and you were talking about CDs and whatnot, I wanted to ask you, as the producer of Mount Minor, what point you became involved and what you did to help. You already given some idea, but how did you help turn this into a film? And then you could tell us about your new CD too. That was what I was thinking.
All right.
CD.
I guess early on, I guess from the beginning, I got involved because Dale showed us, or he gave me a copy of his screenplay, and I remember reading it one night and just reading the whole thing and being pretty struck by it. And I guess myself and some of the other members of our band called Jericho, my husband Jonathan, and Warren and Judy and Amy, we just started talking, and it grew into a full-fledged project. And Dale was basically, the way I got involved was Dale would have something he was looking for, and then I have a brain that likes to research, and I would say, ooh, I'll look into that. And then that just, it kept getting bigger, especially when we decided to film in North Carolina, where I had connections and had lived for a long time. And so I sort of helped him get connected with musicians there. One fun time though, Dale said, Susan, can you come with me to meet Elizabeth? She was performing, I don't know if it was right over the river in Kentucky. Yeah. So we drove out there, and Dale gave her the screenplay. And that was a big moment, because once Elizabeth and Dan were on board, we were like, okay, this is a great opportunity to do something beautiful with these, with the stunning musicians.
Well, Susan herself, for those of you who don't know, is also a wonderful ballad singer and musician. Do you want to tell us about that new CD? I've got a copy of it.
Sure. I should add all the musicians though, because I'm looking at Ma on here and Mike Oberst. When we got that momentum with those musicians on board, it became very exciting. And of course, Judy and Warren, but you were in the band I was in. So we were going to help, So you asked about the CD.
Yeah.
My most recent
project. It's brand new. It's pretty new anyway. So.
Yeah. This has been something I've been working on for a long time. It's an album called The Prettiest Bird, with songs that I've written as early as 2005. It's 12 originals and 2 traditional songs, with gourd banjo and guitar and dulcimer, and had some friends help me out on a few tracks. Actually more than a few tracks, like a lot of it, there's some instrumentation on a bunch of the tracks. Dale actually helped encourage me with the song The Prettiest Bird. So that's kind of a fun connection to the movie, is that.
You also have Elizabeth singing with you on
Oh
there.
gosh, that's right. Yeah, which was fantastic. And that also sort of, since I got to work with Elizabeth on the film and I was recording it right nearby her at a studio in Floyd, and I decided to ask Elizabeth, and the timing just happened to work. And yeah, that was really lovely to get to reconnect and have her add her voice to my project. Yeah.
One other thing real quick, Susan, I just noticed in the chat, people are asking questions, and one of the questions that has come up at every single filming or every single screening we've had was, where did you find those two kids? I don't know if Gloria was going to ask you that or not. I don't mean to jump the gun, but while you're talking about what you did as a producer, I think that was one of the big things you did for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those were your questions to me. I need a girl that dances. I need a boy that fiddles. I'm like, okay, we can find that. Mm-hmm.
Well, they're amazing, both of the two of them as actors and also musicians. It's phenomenal that you found two kids like that, I think, to do that.
Susan,
oh, go ahead.
Connections with the Junior Appalachian Musicians Program, which is just a wonderful program. Sometimes I call it scouting for musicians. It's just it's an after-school program in Virginia and North Carolina, and Susan had been very much involved with that program and had access to a lot of kids, and so.
Oh, so that's where I actually didn't know that, how you managed to find such brilliant kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I asked a friend, Cecil Gerganis, who was teaching ASA in the JAM program, and right away he said, oh, I know someone who could do that. Hazel Paisley comes from a musical family, but also was in JAM, and her dad, Lucas, who's in the film, has been an instructor with JAM. In Allegheny County.
Mm-hmm. Well, we saw Ma Crow there for when Dale was talking, so I have a question for Ma. So Ma Crow plays the adult version of Ruth, who's, we see early on in the film as a young girl. She's from Eastern Kentucky, who grows up and marries Charlie. She had her eye on him when she was like 12 years old. I love those scenes where she wants to get him to hold her hand and he's a little reluctant. So Dale has talked about how the film was inspired by his grandparents who moved from Eastern Kentucky to Ohio when they were young. And I think, Makra, I heard that you come from a similar background. So could you talk about that and how the film speaks to your experiences?
My story was as close to Ruthie Witt as could be, because every summer my mother and father would send me back to East Tennessee to stay at my aunt's farm. My two older brothers would go to another aunt's farm, and they would come and get us at the end of the summer to take us back to Cincinnati to go to school. But so we were sent back to the farm, and by the time I was 12 years old, they had moved back to Scott County, Tennessee. But every summer I was there, and it was like moving back home.
Okay. Is Judy still here? Judy's there. Oh, where'd she go?
Baking bread, but
I'm
she'll
done.
be with you in a minute here.
I'm done.
There she is. I have a question for her. One of my favorite, so Judy plays the young Ruthie's grandmother, right? Yeah. And one of my favorite scenes in the film, really, and she's called Granny Witt in the film, is when she's on the porch talking with the young Charlie, who's been mourning the death several years before of his very young sister. She died. And you say, Granny Witt says, the Lord's music's all around us. It never stops. When you play that fiddle, you're part of it. So listen real close when you play that fiddle. Listen like you're trying to hear a falling, I love this, falling leaf hit the ground. Listen close like that and you might hear her laugh or cry. She might even call your name. Open up your heart to her, Charlie. She's still there watching over. I love that scene. I mean, that's another, you know, sort of generational or, well, the continuity between the living and the dead, really. So the whole film is, you know, kind of so many scenes are about that. And I just wondered if, you know, how you saw that scene as reinforcing that film and, or that theme in the film and how you played that. It was so powerful and so moving.
Thank you. It really, Dale wrote the words and I was able to get right into them and know how I feel when I hear music, and especially when I'm outside, hear the birds and hear the insects and the connection between them, those sounds and the sounds we make when we speak and when we sing, and the fiddle. Your words, I read it in this wonderful liner notes in the CD. You brought the transcendence theme to me and Amy's concept too, that it was the fact that things live on, and when we're not here, the music continues and it's there now from the past. And to connect to that, it was so powerful sitting on that porch in the evening. It was real, it was not staged. He picked that time and that place. There were no sounds, no lights beside the light of the sun and the earth, and the animals were down there, and the universe spoke with me at the same time. So that's how it happened.
Well, it feels like that when we see that scene. It's such a powerful thing. I'm just looking here. I think I've asked all the questions that I wrote down. Are there any more from the chat that we should talk about? I'll get my chat up here.
Hi, Gloria. We do have several from Facebook. Brian wanted to send a message that he says, I jammed with you at Donkey Coffee when you debuted the movie in Athens, Ohio. We have one from B.A. Ebbing Shields that says, hey, little Dale, cuz. So you've got your fans, your family on here. We did have a question sent in through via email, and you might have addressed this, but they wanted to know how you came up with the title of the movie.
Well, there was a scene in the movie where we explained that, but it ended up feeling a little heavy-handed, so we took it out and left it as a mystery, which is what you know, that was, Dan was supposed to say that, and he just, you know, we just felt like it was giving the audience too much. And so the mountain minor, it's a key, sort of. You have your major key, which is happy, your minor key. If you tune that third note down a half step, you get a minor key. But if instead you tune it up and then it becomes a fourth and you leave the third out, that's confusing, but you end up playing in this suspended chord all the time, and it just feels mysterious and unresolved. And a lot of the music in the film is in that key or very similar to that. And that feeling has a long history in music. It was actually playing the modal music in some parts of Europe in history were illegal because they thought it conjured the devil. And our film, we have an old regular Baptist congregation singing in that mountain minor key, and they felt like it put them in touch with the spirit world and the holy realm. And so there's a lot to it. Charlie in the movie, he kind of refers to the mountain minor as the old place, you might say. and he talks about the spiritual connotations of that. So it's a really difficult question to answer specifically, and every musicologist you talk to is going to explain it differently. But it's just that mysterious key, that musical key.
I'd not heard that before. I know that I'm in West Virginia, which is part of the Appalachians, and they've always called us spooky West Virginia.
Right.
So whether it's ghost, paranormal, whatever, I think maybe part of the mountain chain has that reputation. We have another question for Judy. It says, you made us feel like we were on that porch with you. Thank you. And are you sharing the film on college campuses?
Well, connection with the porch and college campuses I'm trying to make. But yes, on the porch, I'm glad you were there with me, but they are sharing. In fact, we were just speaking yesterday or the day before with a college campus that's very close to where we live down here in Southern Ohio. It's St. Clair Community College, and the director of the Appalachian Studies program there is using the film as well with her students that come into her center a lot. And I know that Gloria is doing it as well, I believe. Are you not, with your students?
I am.
So this is perfect. I share with the students, my character was a square dance caller, and I am a square dance caller on our college campus, and we have been sharing this actual experience of dancing as they did in the movie with people in our town for over 30 years. And we continued until the COVID stopped, and we will go back and carry on just as we were in the movie, carrying the culture on.
Sinclair Community College is in Dayton, Ohio.
Right.
Oh, that's great. The more outreach you have, I think the better with this movie. It's a terrific movie. We have another comment from Kit. He says he's an old-time fiddler from the Finger Lakes of New York who has been following you ever since you were in production, and wanted to congratulate you on your well-deserved success. So that's nice. I know that COVID has been a tough time for everyone. Can you all speak to something good? And this movie is good, but other good experiences, because we're trying to end on an up note here. I'm sorry, Kit. Kit's a female. My mistake. But can you talk about some good COVID experiences you've had, maybe that have come from the movie?
I can speak to one. Scott Young, who is our producer, also was our finish editor, and took our film festival version, and we kind of made a lot of modifications to get it ready for distribution. And we had a lot of big plans. We were showing it in theaters. We had been in 20-something theaters and had that many lined up, and we were having a great time. We would have a little mini concert before the showing, and then a Q&A afterwards. And of course, it all came to a stop. And our long-range plan was to eventually try to profit from the movie. But when COVID hit, we realized, Scott and I spent a lot of time, we realized that people were losing their jobs. There were a lot of older people that we really wanted to see the movie that probably wouldn't be able to see it any other way. And so we decided to make the movie free on Amazon Prime, and kind of pretty much give up our hopes of ever really making a real profit from the movie. But that has been probably the best thing about it all, is that I have been getting emails and messages almost every day from people who stumbled on the movie on Amazon, that they'd never heard of it, but it popped up in their suggested movies. And people have said that the movie, I mean, I don't want to overstate it, but almost like it's changed their life because they've been able to actually see a picture of the stories their grandparents and parents have told them. Or it's older people who, I mean, they take the trouble to figure out how to get a hold of me after seeing it on Amazon and send me a message and say, hey, this movie meant so much to me. It was another look at my childhood, one last look. Or we're finally seeing something that's not making us Appalachians look like stupid hillbillies. You know, we matter in the world. And if it hadn't been for COVID, I wouldn't have that. I wouldn't have it. And so that has actually been a blessing that has come from a bad situation. And Scott, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, I just put a comment in the chat window there that the soundtrack probably would not have gotten produced if it weren't for the pandemic. The sound engineer who mixed the album for us and mastered it was quite busy before COVID-19 hit. And he suddenly came available. And all of a sudden people had plenty of time on their hands. And I had wanted to do the soundtrack for quite some time before that, but Dale had me busy with prepping the film for Amazon and Vimeo and KET and several other places that he needed the film customized for. And I just didn't see it happening, you know, being able to devote the attention to it that we put into it. And then suddenly everybody's on lockdown, and Keith Nesso, our sound engineer, lived in the same town where I was living at the time in Southern Arizona. And he had done the final sound mix for the film when we put it out on DVD and Blu-ray. And I wanted to work with him on this. I wanted him to do the soundtrack with us, but I didn't see it happening because he had conferences he was going to. He just had a full calendar. And then suddenly he had an empty calendar, and we all had an empty calendar. And it was like, let's get the soundtrack done now. And we did, so.
That's great. I want you all to be sure and let people how to know to get in touch with you.
The easiest way is through our website, themountainminermovie.com. We've got contact information and information if you're interested in the DVD or Blu-ray or soundtrack, and it's just a good gathering place. We also have a Facebook. We crossed the 5,000 likes today.
Awesome. That's terrific.
5,001. So that's a good place. It's become kind of a community for people to talk about the film and share stories and so forth. And then that's pretty much the best way to get a hold of us.
Okay.
Amy, you didn't say anything yet, Amy.
Where'd she go? Oh, there she is.
I have to tell you, Amy was she's downstairs.
I'm downstairs, so we have an echo. Here,
I just want to say Amy was my #1 cheerleader and encourager through this whole project right up till the very day today. She's downstairs. Ma and I are upstairs in my loft, and she's downstairs right now. That's why we're having this sound problem if we're both on. But she was great. If you've noticed, she hasn't lost a smile on her face the whole time she's been here. And when we did the movie, I said, I need for you to play this crotchety old grandma. So, anyway, if you want to talk a little bit about that, Amy, I'll go on mute.
I think the only thing, you're not muted, but there. Okay, anyway, the only thing I think it's echoing very badly. So it was a pleasure to be part of it all, and I got to stir the soup on the fireplace. Oh, okay, thanks. I think the thing that was the most amazing to me is what we call the movie magic in filming. And there were so many big things and little things. And like Granny Witt's cabin that night, we found that cabin a couple hours before we filmed. So we needed another cabin and it needed to have all these things. And we found it just right in the nick of time. But also with that movie magic is everybody who was on the set, whether they were bringing an old car or just stopping by, it just became a big family. And it was a lot of love and a lot of music and just a pleasure to be a part of.
Well, I want to thank all of you for coming, being on Zoom into Books and our Meet the Authors, Actors, and Musicians Christmas Extravaganza. We also want to thank the Next Generation Indie Book Awards, who is helping sponsor this event for us this week. And I want to wish you the best of luck with your film. And Gloria, I'm going to hand it back to you. You can wrap it up, and thank you very much, everybody.
Well, you asked about if there were any positive things about COVID-19. And I mean, this is one of them, because I could never have, if you had it at your bookstore, this event or something, I would never have been able to participate. And there have been so many Zoom and Facebook concerts. So I've heard so much music that I wouldn't have heard, even though, I mean, you know, pandemic is so horrible, but this kind of thing is the one thing that makes it bearable to me. I just want to say again that Dale mentioned that that if you go to his website, you can purchase the film. You can purchase this wonderful soundtrack album. I didn't realize that it was free on Amazon Prime. I thought there was like it was $2.99, but that's amazing. And it's on Vimeo. So there are several ways to see this film, and you're going to want to like buy it and have it, because if you're anything like me, you'll want to see it like 10 times, so you still won't be finished. We should also thank Headline Books and this series, Zoom Into Books, for hosting this. This has been so wonderful. And Dale mentioned the Facebook page. Go over there, because then you'll find out about other events and discussions and so on. So
I have one final, not just from me, but in the movie, it was important. You may have noticed Amy patting on the porch 3 times and Charlie patting 3 times. And I told him, remember, 3 times, Pat, the spirit is with us. The first was Dale putting this as a screenplay. The second was the wonderful film. And the third is the wonderful CD with these liner notes that bring it all together. So 3 times, remember.
Delightful seeing everyone.
Well, thank you all so much. I hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving and Christmas holiday. And I hope you'll come back and see us again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.